me. Okay, so we're live now. If you want to start the meeting, Councillor Lowe, thank you.
All right, excellent, thank you. So, welcome everybody to this licensing committee meeting. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Pacey for mentoring me into taking this chair. Thank you very much, Councillor Pacey. I know it's been a while since we've had any live meetings. This meeting will be recorded and the sound recording is subsequently available via the Council's website. Please also note that under the Openness of Local Government Bodies Regulations 2014, that other members may film, record, tweet, blog from this meeting. The use of these images and sound recordings are not in the Council's control. So item 1 on this agenda, apologies. Have we got any apologies?
Through you, Chair, you need to confirm who is present and also to ask members to make sure that the meeting wasn't disturbed, etc.
I haven't got that as a pattern, but do you want me to go through members one at a time, Nikki?
I did forward you the running order.
You didn't, Nikki.
I can send it on to you again, sir.
I'm going to have trouble there to do 2 meetings together. So let's start at the top. Councillor Pacey, can you confirm you can both see and hear proceedings?
I can both hear and see the proceedings.
Councillor Poplar, can you hear and both see proceedings?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm I can see and hear proceedings.
Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I can confirm that I can see and hear proceedings.
Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Chair. I can both hear and see the proceedings.
Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear the proceedings.
Councillor Ranson.
Thank you, Chair. I can both hear and see the proceedings.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear the proceedings.
Councillor Paley.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that I can both hear and see the meeting.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear the meeting.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm I can see and hear the meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Tillotson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Tillotson, I can see and hear proceedings.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I can both see and hear.
So do you want me to confirm the officers now? So, Nikki.
Thank you, Chair. I can both see and hear the proceedings.
Karen.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear proceedings and live streaming. Thank you.
Thank you. Grace.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can see and hear the proceedings.
Alan Twills.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm I can see and hear the proceedings.
And I believe we've also got a representative of the police here tonight as well, haven't we? Nick Peacock.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can confirm that I can hear the meeting. However, I'm not able to see it.
Have I missed anybody out? I take it that's a no then. So apologies.
Through you, Chair, we have 2 apologies. We have Councillor Sandy Forrest and Councillor Brooks has indicated he will be able to attend the meeting slightly later.
Thank you. So item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. I can confirm they're true and correct. Are we all in favour? That's showing all in favour. Are you happy with that, Nikki?
It's routine to go through and just confirm verbally so that the members of the public can also see that the members of the committee are confirming that they're okay with the minutes. Thank you.
That's fine. Councillor Pacey.
Yes, I can confirm that I'm happy with the minutes.
Councillor Poplar.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I also confirm I'm happy with the minutes.
Councillor Needham.
Chair, I wasn't part of the committee for the last meeting, so would I abstain on this?
Councillor Savage.
I confirm the minutes for the last meeting.
Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Chair. I confirm I agree the minutes of the meeting.
Councillor Ransom.
Thank you, Chair. I confirm the minutes of the last meeting.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. This is my first meeting, so I can't confirm the minutes.
Councillor Palin.
Through the chair, I don't think I was present at the last meeting. If somebody could check that out.
Chair, can I say, Councillor Palin was present. I've got the attendance licensing committee present for the
Chair, I can confirm that I agree with the minutes of the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm I was happy with the minutes of the meeting.
Councillor Gerard.
Chair, I wasn't here for the last meeting. This is my first meeting, so I'll abstain, if I may, please.
Councillor Tillotson.
Yeah, thank you. I can confirm I agree with the minute.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. This is my first meeting, so I can't confirm anything.
I think that's pretty well unanimous, Nikki.
Well, yeah, you've got 9 members that have confirmed the minutes, and that's above a quorum, so the minutes are agreed as accurate and can be signed. Thank you.
Thank you. Disclosure of interest. Has anybody got anything they wish to disclose? Questions under scrutiny, other questions under other committee procedures? I'm guessing there's none.
No questions have been submitted. Thank you.
Review of special policy of cumulative impact. Item 5. Who's presenting this? Are you presenting this, Grace?
I am, Chair. I don't know if Alan wants to do an introduction first.
If that's okay, Chair, I'll do an introduction.
Far away, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, item 5 is the review of the special policy on the cumulative impact. This report is to consider the review of the cumulative impact zone policy as contained in the Council Statement of Licensing Policy under the provisions of the Licensing Act 2003. This is part of the requirement to undertake a review of this policy every 3 years. If the proposed policy is approved, this will be consulted on prior to then being submitted to full council for final approval. The details of the consultation is included in the report. The policy is in place to deal with the cumulative impact of licensed premises within a defined area. The police are a key partner and have been providing updated evidence to support keeping the policy in place. I shall now ask Grace Dowson, Licensing Manager, to cover the main details within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alan. As Alan states, the purpose of this report is for the members to review the special policy on cumulative impact, which is required every 3 years after a change in legislation in April 2018 for consultation prior to submission to the full council in May 2021. The proposed review of the special policy cumulative impact is included within the Statement of Licensing Policy, which was last approved in 2017 and which is attached to Appendix 1. It is proposed that the existing special policy on cumulative impact contained with the existing Statement of Licensing Policy remains the same in respect of the area it covers. The current area is shown in Appendix 2. The 182 guidance was amended in April 2018 and removed the rebuttable presumption against grant of a premise in a cumulative impact zone. Paragraph 4.3 of the Statement of Licensing Policy has been amended to reflect this change, and these changes are shown in tract within the policy. Special policy should be reviewed regularly to assess if it is still needed and if any revisions are required. Prior to the review, the police and other responsible authorities were contacted to seek evidence to justify the retention of the special policy on the cumulative impact the area is covered. Nick Peacock, representative from Leicestershire Police, is here this evening should members have any questions. Members are asked to approve the draft statement of licensing policy, i.e. the cumulative impact within that, for consultation prior to formal submission to the full council in May 2021. A list of those to be included in the consultation are provided at page 7 of the report. Back to yourself, Councillor Lowe.
Thank you. Has any members got any questions for Grace or Alan? I can't see any thumbs. Anybody? So have the police got any questions or any comment to make?
No, we haven't, Chair.
Thank you. So in that case, then I've got to go round each member I agree to agree this recommendation. Is that the case?
Yes.
It is, through you, Chair.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify when the policy was going to full council, because I believe the report states that it's going in April 2021.
Yes.
Yes, sorry, I realised afterwards that I'd stated the licensing committee date of May instead of full council in April. So yes, it is April. Thank you.
So that would just change then, will it?
Yeah, it was just an error in the provision of the detail. It's got the correct date in the report. So yes, you're correct. You just need to go around the committee to check that they're happy to agree the 3 recommendations on page 6 of the report.
Okay. So, Councillor Pacey.
Yes, I agree. The report as presented.
Councillor Poplar.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I agree the report as presented.
Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, I agree with the report.
Councillor Savage.
I agree the report as presented.
Councillor Howe.
I agree the report is presented.
Councillor Ranson.
I agree with the recommendations on page 6 and the reasons behind the recommendations on page 6 as recommended, and providing the amendment of the date is done as well to the correct date, Chair. All right.
Thank you, Councillor Ranson. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I support the recommendations.
Councillor Palin.
Thank you, Chair. I agree on the report and the recommendations.
Councillor Gerard. Can't hear you, Councillor Gerard.
I agree with the report and the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Tillotson. Can't hear you. No, still can't hear you.
Sorry, I had a problem unmuting. Yes, I agree the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I support the recommendations.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I agree as presented.
Again, that's unanimous. Thank you all very much. Item 7, review of Hackney Carriage and private licence policy. Alan, I believe you're introducing this item.
Chair, are we on item 6, licensing update?
We are, sorry, yes, item 6, yeah. But you're still doing this.
Thank you, Chair. So this is item 6 in terms of the licensing update. This report provides an update to the committee of the work of the licensing team. But before I hand over to Grace, again, I just wanted to commend her and the team for all their work and support over the past 12 months. During this difficult and ever-changing situation as part of the COVID-19 pandemic, the team have continued to operate, adapt, and also take on new areas of work, such as the pavement licensing. The team have ensured that the public safety has been at the heart of the licensing work. They have adapted very well and I would like to give my personal thanks to Grace and the team. I will now hand over to Grace to update the committee on the work of the team.
Thank you, Alan. Yes, Chair, this is an update as to a review of the licensing section's work since March 2020 and the start of lockdown. During COVID, there has been a fast changing legislatively landscape, and standard processes and systems have had to be postponed, stopped or adapted. Changes have been made to the licensing service to help minimise the risk and spread of the virus, while still working with the trade to potentially keep them working where they can. I'll just briefly go through the changes. Should members have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those. In respect of drivers, unfortunately, we haven't been able to work with new drivers or new applicants coming into Charnwood because with such stages as the knowledge test, we haven't been able to yet establish a means of adapting that to work within the COVID-19 times. Changes have been made in respect of medicals, the DVLA mandates temporarily, and potentially looking at a third party in respect of carrying on those procedures for renewal existing drivers to keep those working during this time. The vehicles, prior to COVID, drivers used to come into the customer service centre to collect their plates and provide all their paperwork. The licensing team moved this quickly onto the online, whereby drivers communicated with ourselves via the licensing generic email address, with licensing staff taking payment over the phone. And we're actually seeing drivers in the council car park, fully COVID secure, to issue and collect plates and examine accident damaged vehicles as and when required. Just follow on. In respect of the Licensing Act, all applications have been asked to come in via gov.uk. Prior to COVID, we would have seen, the licensing staff would have seen people within the customer service centre. We have done one such meeting for somebody who was struggling to do it online, but otherwise all applications are coming in via the gov.uk. That is basically the same for general licensing and gambling. Those are all coming in via the generic email. As Alan says, we have had to adapt to introduce new legislation, and the Business and Planning Act 2020 was introduced in July of last year. This introduced a temporary legal framework to district councils for issuing pavement licences, aimed at enabling premises to expand their area to sell food and drink, and whilst remaining COVID secure. This framework was originally superseded by the Highways Department, Leicestershire County Council, who issue permanent pavements. Under the new Act, councils were required to process applications for pavement licences temporarily within a 2-week period, and these licences last within a minimum of 3 months and up to the maximum end date of the 30th of September 2021. Since July 2020, we have we've received 12 applications, we've issued 7, all due to expire in September 21. 4 applications were refused and 1 was withdrawn by the applicant. We work very closely on those applications with other representatives and other bodies such as Leicestershire Highways and the police. So that is ongoing, and I'm sure they will start again once the weather improves and the premises are allowed to reopen. We've had a number of online Zoom hearings during the coronavirus period. We've had, I'm afraid the report says 2, but we've actually had 3 which are listed in respect of premises. And we've also had one hearing in respect of a driver whose badge was revoked. There was one appeal during this time made to the Magistrates Court in respect of a personal licence that had initially been refused by the committee. That went back to the court as the applicant appealed, and the court re-admitted it back to the council, having heard the applicant's mitigation. There have been enforcement actions carried on during this period. A lot of the inspections have unfortunately had to be postponed, but the day-to-day reactive work has carried on. We have visited 29 licensed premises. A number of those were carried out along with partnership agencies to check COVID security. 39 visits were carried out to check the blue and white notices required by application process. And we gave 33 premises advice over the telephone and sent out 17 advice letters. In respect of taxi licensing, we have dealt with 56 vehicle inspections where officers were not satisfied with the fitness of Hackney carriage or private hire vehicles. We've had 20 visits carried out to drivers and 46 to vehicles to deliver or collect plates during the first lockdown. 9 complaints were received in respect of drivers or vehicles. 4 warning letters were issued to drivers, with a further 9 letters issued sending out council penalty points to drivers. 2 drivers were revoked by myself in liaison with the head of regulatory services, and all details of the drivers revoked have been added to the National Register of Taxi and Private Hire Licence Revocations and Refusals, the NR3, passed on to Leicestershire Police and other Leicestershire licensing authorities. We've had 1 visit carried out to a gambling premise, and we've had telephone advice given out to scrap metal dealers. There are some future legislation changes, one of which is the taxi standards, of which there is a further report tonight to give further detail. There is also information concerning a new tax check that is being introduced by the government in respect to the Finance Bill 2021, which is to make the renewal of licences to drive taxis, drive and operate private hire vehicles and deal in scrap metal conditional on applicants completing checks that confirm they are appropriately registered for tax. That will affect people like ourselves, licensing authorities in England and Wales that administer those licensing applications. And basically it means that an applicant who wishes to renew a licence will need to carry out a tax check. The licensing body, typically ourselves, will have to obtain confirmation from HMRC that the applicant has completed the check before being able to consider their renewal application. This measure is due to be introduced from April 2022, and we await further guidance on that. There are future changes that we are likely to make to Charnwood driver process in respect of ensuring that the system is streamlined and works for the online systems that we're currently dealing with. And we are currently looking and working with a third party, Personnel Checks, to look at them doing our DBS checks and our DVLA mandates for both renewing and grant drivers in the future, to make it more of a more efficient and online system. And that's the update, Chair, at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Considering the country's been in lockdown, it appears you've still been quite busy.
Yes. Yes, we have. And I support Alan in respect of stating that the licensing staff have been extraordinary in keeping up and keeping going with the changes whilst working from home, which is a complete new experience for most of them.
So I can see 2 members with their hands up at the moment to ask questions. So Councillor Poplar, you're first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Grace, for your detailed overview. I also like to echo the sentiments of Alan, and if you could pass on our best wishes to your colleagues for all their hard work, it is appreciated. It's in respect of page 53.7.0, and it kind of turns to page 54 as well. I obviously understand you can't do routine spot checks like you used to do before the pandemic took place, but I am a bit worried that unfortunately things might slip through the net. Can you give some extra reassurance that obviously spot checks are still continue to take place? That's the first question. And the second question is, what other actions are being taken place to find a long-term replacement for Mr. Bunker? Because I think that post needs filling as soon as possible. Thank you very much, Grace.
Thank you, Chair. In respect of the spot checks, obviously we are unable to carry out inspections as most of the premises have been shut. I can reassure you that when the premises have been open for the short interim between the 1, 2 and 3 lockdowns of different queries, we've followed up complaints. We have been out on several joint partnership working visits with both the police and our colleagues in environmental health in respect of COVID security, and at the same time took the opportunity to do licensing inspection work. We've done the same when we've done pavement visits. So we are carrying on in respect of any queries that we receive and dealing with any complaints. I don't know whether Alan wants to respond in respect of Mr. Bunker's position.
Thank you, Grace. Yeah, if that's okay, Chair.
Carry on, Alan.
Yeah, obviously we're looking at staff replacements as we go along. There's a lot of search reviews going on at the moment across the whole of the council, but we're certainly keen on replacing. But also at the moment we're looking at updating the service and changing the back office systems as well. So we might need some sort of additional administration support at the moment to keep us going and to help us to become more online and transfer that work online. So yeah, we're certainly looking at that as things open back up, how we adapt the service and look at recruiting as we're able to moving forward, subject to the ongoing service reviews.
Are you happy with them answers, Councillor Poplar?
I am. Thank you, Chair. Thank you both for the responses you've given.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Oh, we can.
Yeah, thank you. I can't give a page number because on the computer it doesn't give a page number, but I looked at 7.2 where it says 56 suspensions, which is about 1 a week. Are they ones that we've triggered looking at the vehicles, or is that people, how do they get triggered, the suspensions?
Yeah, there are a variety of reasons. Our vehicles have to go a 6-monthly interim test, but they have a plate and a license for a year. So for example, if a vehicle has gone into the garage and failed the interim test, we will suspend that until such time as it is classed as mechanically fit to be back out and working. Likewise, if a vehicle's insurance expires, we will ask for a new insurance certificate, and if we don't get that prior to the expiry date, we will suspend that vehicle. It can also be accident damage. So if a driver contacts us to say they've been involved in an RTA, we will have them, if the vehicle is drivable, bring the vehicle to the council car park, and dependent on the damage, we may well suspend that. A number of these suspensions have been lifted since this date, but those are the sort of things that we act upon, and ultimately in respect of public safety. So anything that we're not sure about, we will suspend. We've just recently had a driver who's had issues with his medical fitness, so we have both suspended his driver's license, and as a result of that, as he's the only driver of his vehicle, suspended his vehicle.
Yeah.
You happy with that, Councillor Howe?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to, I've got one other point from further down the report, but I mean, I'd like to say I can see that, you've had to do a lot of improvisation during the year, so well done. And as I say, I think this is going to force us to go more online.
Yes.
I mean, I've had the misfortune to be dealing with DVLA recently, and but they have got a lot more stuff online now. And I mean, we can apply for passports online now, and it's clearly the way we need to go. And then the other one, 8.1 with these tax checks. I mean, I'll be fascinated to know when it comes out. As far as you know, it's just a tax check, but we're not at the moment disputing, you know, whether they're just on the system or whether they've actually logged their self-assessment returns and paid the tax yet, have we? Presumably you're not aware of what standard the tax check goes to.
Not at this moment in time, no, Councillor Howe. It's relatively new legislation. At the moment, we are involved in the National Fraud Initiatives, which every 2 years they ask us to provide details of all of our licensed drivers to check certain things such as that and benefit claiming. So I presume it's an extension of that. But at the moment, we are still awaiting the sort of details and how we as an authority will carry that out with our drivers.
Yeah, thank you very much, because bear in mind I work for HMRC, or used to, you know, I can see that unless it's a fairly straightforward thing, it could add to a lot of complication where, you know, if people haven't paid their tax or whatever, it could end up a bit of a nightmare. That. No, thank you very much for that. I'm happy now, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Pace there, you've got your hand up, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to say a really big thank you to all the members of the licensing department, because they've obviously done an excellent job over very hard circumstances, and I think they deserve a big thank you for that. One request, if you like, obviously a lot has taken place, but I certainly haven't heard of all these things that are going on. And I need to report back at local council meetings what's happening in licensing. Would it be possible just to get not a report, but a list of things as they happen once a month, or all these sort of figures? Because it just goes to show what a tremendous amount of work is being done by the licensing department that isn't getting through any further to us and or local councils. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
It certainly isn't a problem to provide a report. As Alan stated, we are looking at a better, or should I say a new back office system, which hopefully will have a report system included in it. So we should be able to run things off much quicker. But no, we can certainly provide an information statement or report out to all members of the licensing committee to advise you, possibly every 3 months, quarterly, something like that.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's all I need.
Thank you, Councillor Pacey. Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Grace, could you send it to all borough councillors? So, you know, we've all got the information at hand, if you would, please. Thank you, Chair.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yes, that's fine, Councillor Gerard. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one thing I'd like to add. Obviously, a lot of licensed premises have been closed now for many months and not doing a great deal. I'm also noticing a lot of pubs sadly closing and possibly looking for new licensees to take their premises on. Can you see, and are we prepared if we get an influx of people wanting to take new licenses on? You know, can we cope as a borough?
My answer to that is, Chair, that we would cope. We have a number of taxi issues at the moment outstanding, and we're trying to work on the processes of the drivers to get that sorted and out the way, with the hope that the pubs will open April or May, and that we may see the sort of the premises paperwork coming in at that point. We are seeing quite a few changes in pub ownership and changes in the designated premises supervisor. So that is still ongoing. We are seeing that. I'm expecting that as and when the premises can open, we may see more variations to get outside space and more temporary event notices. So yes, as we are very reactive, and we will work with what we can, but obviously with the Licensing Act, it is very time driven. There's 28 days here, 10 days there. So we will work within that process as best as we can.
Oh, excellent, thank you. I can't see anybody else's hand up or anybody else making any gestures that they want to speak. So I believe I've now got to go round to everybody and just say that we acknowledge this report. Councillor Pacey.
Yes, Chair, I do acknowledge the report.
Thank you. Councillor Popley.
Thank you, Chair. I also acknowledge the report. Thank you.
Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Chair. I acknowledge the report.
Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Chair. I acknowledge the report.
Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Chair. I acknowledge the report and thank the team for all their work in difficult circumstances.
Thank you. Councillor Ranson.
Thank you, Chair. I acknowledge the report and likewise thank the team for all their hard work.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Chair. I acknowledge the report and I too would like to thank the team for all their hard work.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I acknowledge the report and give my thanks as well.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I acknowledge the report and thank them for all their hard work.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I note the content of the report. Thank you.
Councillor Paley.
Thank you, Chair. I also acknowledge the report, and I'd also like to congratulate Alan and Grace and the team for the sterling work that they've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tillotson.
Yeah, and thank the team. For sake of transparency, I need to say that my internet went down halfway through Grace's presentation, so I didn't hear all of it, but nevertheless, thank them for all their hard work.
Thank you. So I think that's unanimous that we've all agreed verbally that we accept the report. Item 7, to review the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Licence policy. Alan, I think you're introducing it and Grace is going to present it.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this item 7 is a review of the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Licensing policy. This report outlines the proposed changes to the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Licensing policy following the publication of the Department of Transport's statutory taxi and private hire standards. The policy is to ensure standards are in place to protect the safety of the travelling public. Charnwood's current policy was very much in line with the new standards and did not require significant changes. As technology has also changed, the service will also need to adapt to these and implement changes to how the service is delivered, some of which Grace has already made note of. If approved, the policy will then be consulted on with the trade. I shall now ask Grace to go through the report and respond to any specific questions.
Thank you, Alan. Chair. Yes, as Alan states, this report seeks to review and update the current Council's Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Licensing policy, which is attached to Appendix B. Considering the recent taxi standards guidance issued by the Department of Transport, the committee is asked to approve the policy changes for consultation prior to final approval by the Licensing Committee in May 2021 after a period of consultation with the trade. July 2020, the Department of Transport released statutory taxi and private hire vehicle standards, which are attached to Appendix A of the report. These are to be given, considered, implemented and adopted within our policy unless there is a compelling local reason not to. The report only covers areas that the existing Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Licensing policy doesn't cover. I wasn't sure, Chair, how you would like me to go through this. Would you like me to go through it via each point?
I think it's important just to come across with the key points, Grace. But I'm guessing most members have actually read this report anyway.
Thank you, Chair. Report at Part B goes through the changes from point 4 onwards. Each point states the policy within the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire policy, and at the end of each point states the standard, the section within the standards, if you wish to compare the two. Obviously, the policy as attached to Appendix B has got track changes on it, so you can see where the actual changes will occur, and that is what we will consult on with the trade. So if I just briefly go through each, 4.1, the DFT standards recommend that the policy, the licensing Hackney Carriage and Private Hire policy, is reviewed every 5 years. Currently, we review it every 3 years. It is proposed that the review of the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire licensing policy is moved to match that of the DFT guidance and other authorities, and that it would be reviewed on a 5-yearly basis. Point 4.2 is to add, it's actually page 115 of Appendix B, should you wish to look at the changes. That is in respect of new provisions relating to whistleblowing, enabling licensing officers to be confidentially informed of a safeguarding issue, such as a driver who works for a private hire operator, say, who wishes and has got concerns to raise. They can raise those with ourselves, or they can raise it with their operators by following the whistleblowing guidance on gov.uk. 4.3 is just an additional sentence to add that we would work with the police in respect of the common law police disclosure to obtain details on any applicant if they have been arrested, bailed, not charged or suspected of being involved in an offence. That was previously known as the not notifiable occupational scheme, and that changes at page 119 of Appendix B. 4.4 is in respect of convictions, and this has been amended throughout the policy, including the penalty points within section 5, the enforcement section of the policy. And that is to give an additional sentence to say that if a licence holder has been arrested or released, charged or convicted of a sexual offence, any offence involving dishonesty or violence, and any motoring offence, that they are to advise the licensing section within 48 hours of those offences, whereas all other offences are within 10 working days. That is page 122 of Appendix B. 4.5 is an additional sentence to advise that all licensed drivers are required to maintain a continuous registration with the DBS update service to enable the licensing authority to routinely check for new information every 6 months, and that drivers that do not subscribe to the update service would be subject to a check or a new DBS every 6 months. That is page 127 of Appendix B. If I can just advise members that that is hoped that if we do work with personnel checks, they help and assist the drivers sign up to the update service, and they also provide us a weekly update of all of our drivers as to whether there's been any changes on those DBSs. In respect of 4.6, which is page 126 of Appendix B, that is an additional sentence that has been added to revise or to give us to state that a decision to review, refuse or revoke a licence as the individual is thought to present a risk of harm to a child or vulnerable adult will be referred to the disclosure and barring service. So that's a power given to us as a licensing authority to make a referral in respect of our role as a safeguarding Like I say, that's page 126 of Appendix B. 4.7 of the policy, again, an additional sentence has been added to advise page 126 of Appendix B that in the interests of public safety, Charnwood will not issue a licence to any individual that appears on either barred list. That is something that of information that we receive through an applicant's DBS certificate. Page 123, that refers to our existing knowledge test. The DFT guidance suggests that the knowledge test should also have an oral context to it as well as a written, to ensure that someone can take direction from a customer as well as understand any written instruction. At the moment, our knowledge test is purely written. We are currently working at how we can change that under the COVID situation and restrictions, but we are able to advise that in the future we will look at how oral aspect of the knowledge test can be introduced. The next couple of sections are sections brand new to us and are not currently included at all in our policy. So the standards recommend criminality checks for vehicle proprietors or owners in the form of a basic disclosure from the DBS, and that the check is undertaken every 6 months. To explain that to the councillors, a proprietor is somebody who owns the vehicle. So they may own a private hire or they may own a hackney carriage, but they may not necessarily drive it. They may rent it out to a driver. Or in the case of a private hire operator, they might own the vehicle and somebody else might drive it. So the DFT guidance recommends that the proprietor, who isn't necessarily a driver, is recommended to have a basic DBS check for criminality purposes. That wouldn't be required of any person who is already licensed with us. So it wouldn't require drivers to have 2 checks. It would be purely those that own a vehicle, but not necessarily drive it. And as far as I'm aware, that would involve lease companies who provide our drivers with vehicles for insurance and accident damage. 4.10, again, a change that isn't currently included in our policy. The standards recommend that licensing authorities should consult to identify if there are local circumstances which indicate that the installation of CCTV in vehicles would have either a positive or an adverse net effect on the safety of taxi and private hire vehicles, including children or vulnerable adults, and taking into account potential privacy issues. A further annex at the rear of the DFT standards does advise that it is important to note at this point that a licensing authority which makes this a mandatory condition, i.e. all vehicles install CCTV, that we, the licensing authority, would be the data controller. Currently, our policy at section 3.320 advises the trade that CCTV can be a valuable deterrent. It doesn't request it to be mandatory, but it does advise that it is best at the best of the judgment of the owner as to whether they want it in their vehicle or not. Moving on, section 4 is referred to on page 157 of Appendix B, that's point 411 of the report. Enhanced DBSs and barred list checks are not currently available for private hire operator licenses. Under the current licensing policy, every applicant for a private hire operator license, if they are not already a current driver with us, is required to complete a basic DBS check, which tells you about the current convictions, and a statutory declaration with their solicitor, which tells you about any spent convictions every 3 years. The basic disclosure only shows the unspent, whilst the statutory declaration is requested and signed by a solicitor. The standards from the DfT state that licensing authorities should require a basic disclosure from the DBS annually for operators. So this is something that the council can change within the policy, but that is purely for someone who is an operator and not a licensed driver as well. So again, it's not a duplicate of the requirement. Point 4.12 of the report is a further intention that isn't included within the policy as it currently stands. I have included a tracked change of proposed what to be included, and that's at page 164 of the policy at Appendix B. The standards recommend that all licensing authorities should, as a condition of granting a private hire operator's licence, require a register to be kept by that operator of all staff that will be taking bookings or dispatching vehicles to customers. And that is basically that you know, we would know as a licensing authority whether those persons have been listed and checked by the operator. 4.13, carrying on in a similar vein, this is in respect of the standards recommending that private hire operators should be required to evidence that they have had sight of a basic DBS check on all individuals listed on their register of booking and dispatch staff. So that isn't something that we require, that is something that we would require a private hire licensed operator to do of their staff, and we would be able to check and ask for those checks to be shown to us once we do our annual inspection and visit of those operators. And that proposed contents is at 164, page 164 of Appendix B. That register is required to be a living document that maintains records of all of those in the role of booking and dispatch, and they need to be kept for a period of 6 months. 4.14 of the report, again, not currently in the policy, requests that all private hire operators should be required to provide on application to ourselves a copy of their policy on employing ex-offenders in roles of the booking and dispatch staff. So we would basically amend the council's operator application form to include this on the application checklist. 4.15, this is in respect of passengers carrying vehicles, which are PCVs. Basically, PCV licensed drivers are subject to different checks for a taxi and private hire driver, as the work normally undertaken, i.e. driving a bus, does not present the same risk to passengers. Basically, this part of the DfT standard states that as an operator, they should advise if they are letting a more than an 8-seater passenger vehicle to be hired, that they should inform the booker that the PSV is necessary and that the driver of that vehicle will have had different checks to that of a licensed driver by ourselves as the licensing authority. And finally, point 4.16, this is in respect of enforcing the licensing regime, and the DfT recommend that all licensing authorities should work together and jointly authorise officers from other authorities so that compliance and enforcement can be taken against licensees from outside the area. This is something that if the need to arise was there, all the Leicestershire councils would need to consider, and a suitable protocol and authorisations would need to be agreed at that time. Thank you, Chair. That's a very brief synopsis of quite a lengthy report, and I apologise. But should there be any questions, I will do my utmost to answer them.
Well done, Grace. I think you presented that very well. So anybody got any questions? Councillor Poplar.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to echo, first of all, what the Chairman's just said. Excellent presentation there, Grace. I know it's a lot to take in, but you put it across very well. My one concern, and I think I raised this last year when we just Hackney carriages before, was about this advisory thing and not mandatory. And I know it's obviously always a bugbear of all of us, but where it says in point 4.5, additional sentence added to advise that all licensed drivers are required to maintain continuous registration, etc., etc. But those who don't subscribe to the update service will still be subject to 6 monthly reviews. To me, it seems like a double negative somehow. Does that make sense? And then later on in the report, you go on to 4.11 about the enhanced DBS. I'm encouraged to see the stat deck things now in there, which is great. The fact there is that sort of double accountants, and now is it 4.16 you say cross-boundary reviews as well, which again I know when you go over the borders things can get missed, but it comes back to 4.5 again. How can we as a council, as councillors, as an authority, you as a department, safeguard ourselves against bad practice? Because I refer back to the previous item when we looked at the report you so well put together as a team and presented. And there was a comment regarding the magistrates court, and an item got took from the magistrates court, brought back before us as a subcommittee, and we had to make a decision. And it seems that there's almost like a passing the buck thing here. How can we safeguard ourselves as a council against bad practice and ensure that these stringent checks are taking place? That's my question in a nutshell, Grace. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll try and answer that. The case that got passed back to ourselves as a council was in respect of a personal licence under the Licensing Act 2003. And unfortunately, the applicant didn't fail to attend the licensing committee originally in December 2019. So he was unable to present any reasoning or any mitigation at that time. And the committee chose to hear the the committee hearing in his absence. He then chose to appeal on the grounds that he wished his case to be heard. When it got to the court asked that they could basically rehear the case, or they asked that the council rehear the case. Now, under the Licensing Act, there is no such case. If the committee hears a case and it's refused, then it's expected to go to the magistrates court. The applicant attended the magistrates court and provided mitigation that the committee hadn't had at that time. The court felt that they couldn't actually agree that the committee had been wrong because it hadn't, based on what the committee decision they had made at that time. So they chose to return it to the committee for the mitigation to be taken into account. So unfortunately, that was the circumstances of that case. In respect of DBSs, we currently do them every 3 years, but as of April 2020, the Hackney policy asked that all drivers signed up to the update service. So as Alan said, we were already part way to what the DFT recommendations were. They are now suggesting that those DBS checks are done 6 monthly, which, to be honest, would, if it was meant to be like that, would cause extra expense to the drivers. Whereas if they sign up to the update service, then those checks are done automatically. We can automatically access the DBS at any time and check on that driver. And the personnel checks that we are currently liaising with to work on the online DBSs, they would be able to give us a report on a weekly basis. So at the moment, whereas we rely somewhat on the driver or the police or whoever reporting those incidents to, I am hoping that the more online that we get, the more the systems are there to be able to prevent anything being missed. Should a driver fail to sign up to the update service, then they would be required under the proposed new policy to produce a new DBS within a 6-month period. So I think this is where the DFT are coming from, that they are looking at a minimum standard to be adopted by all councils. Some councils are more robust than others, but they are looking to do that overall starting line for everybody.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Poplar?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Grace. I say it's unfortunate. I hate to keep bringing the same point up, but I think if we all cover ourselves as best we can, it's always better to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, 4.6, I'm really pleased at seeing that, because to me, everyone's got to be protected. And 4.16, if the need arises something, all Leicestershire councils need to consider and suitable protocol authorisation will need to be agreed at this time. Is that just county or is it country-wide, please?
Within Leicestershire, Councillor Gerard, there are 9 authorities. All 9 authorities currently, like across the country, all implement their taxes in slightly different ways. Unlike the Licensing Act and the Gambling Act, where under national direction we have to have a policy and we are guided as to what that policy includes. Under taxes, that is very much left to the individual authority. So unfortunately, every authority around the country does their taxes slightly different. So ultimately, should it be decided that the 9 Leicestershire authorities were to work together, that is when a joint protocol and the means and how would be looked at.
Just say something happened with a taxi driver, say after 2 years, could you then tap into, say, somewhere in Cornwall to see if Cornwall had been mentioned? Could you tap into something there to see if they've got any evidence or whatever?
Potentially, yes. As I stated before, we are slightly ahead of the game in the fact that we are already registered and are working with the National Refusal and Revocation Register, the NR3. That means that any driver that we revoke, their details go on that NR3.
Lovely.
And any local authority around the country, Britain or Wales, can look at that NR3. So if one of our drivers who we've revoked applies somewhere else, and that application form asks if that driver has been refused, and if that driver includes those details, they can look that up. Likewise, like us, if they make it a standard check on all new applicants to check the NR3 for that driver's name, if they were to come across that driver's name, it then advises them to contact us, as in the licensing authority that's listed them, as to why they were revoked.
Lovely. Many thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the CCTV, are we aware of any councils that are insisting on it? Is my understanding if the taxi firms decide to video inside their cars, and as long as they put the warning signs up, because we're not insisting, that's their records. And when it says about data protection, does that mean that if we insisted, they wouldn't download the information to us, would they? I assume. It's, you know, I just couldn't work out how we'd be responsible if we didn't actually handle the information. We just insisted people had cameras in cars, please. Thank you.
Currently, Councillor Howe, we don't insist.
No.
We do ask each driver to contact us and write in to say that they have CCTV, so that we have a record on their driver file. We do insist that they have signs up to say that, and that we give the customers the contents. I have to be honest and say I'm not 100% sure how the data controller works, and Alan may have more information on that. I am aware of certain councils that have gone down the mandatory route, Rotherham being one of them, obviously going back to the safeguarding issue that first occurred there. I am aware of other councils that have tried to introduce it and have then changed their mind based on argument raised by the trade. So I think probably out of anything, that's likely to be the most decisive area because of the cost to potential drivers and whether any of that cost would be supplemented by the council.
Yeah. Right, thank you.
So I'm right there, aren't I? You're hoping to put this out for consultation in March?
Yeah. Yeah.
So will it come back to this committee for its agreement in its final form?
That is the intention, unless it's only minor changes, at which the committee report asks for authorisation to be given to Alan, then anything major would be brought back to this committee, yes.
Thank you. Has any other councillors got any questions? Councillor Pacey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a big supporter of CCTV, and I think it's important that we have it in taxis. The only thing that concerns me is what about the situation with young people and children in a car, where there are a lot of restrictions on being able to photograph young people, which is why all our schools are now covered up. Are there any rules and regulations or anything which alters the situation for younger people in a vehicle?
Again, Councillor Pacey, there is guidance from the CCTV. I believe it's some sort of union. I'm not completely au fait with all the details.
No.
And it would be something that if we were to consider being the data controller, we would have to do further research into. So I think it will be a matter of interest as to what comes back, if anything, on the consultation as to what the trade and any public wish to voice on it.
Okay. Alan, I think you've got something to add on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think being the data controller it would be a significant impact in terms of the management of that, checking the footage, checking procedures, checking all that process would be quite significant, which is why not many authorities have gone that route and have stated that we recommend from the safety of the drivers and the travelling public that companies do that on their behest, and obviously the police can access that information if it's available from an evidential point of view. So it would be a significant impact in terms of administrating that kind of process and how we'd have to go through it. But we would consult to see if it's necessary, and then we'd have to consider the impact and what will be required. In terms of the safeguarding side of it, obviously we've got safeguarding policies in place so that if material is collected that shouldn't be collected, then there's obviously action can be taken if we become aware of that. And that's why we have the safeguarding training in place as well, so that drivers, operators know what they should and shouldn't be doing in terms of, when they take people into their vehicles. So we'll try and cover it that way in terms of the safeguarding policy side of it.
I would like to hope that CCTV in any car will help with safeguarding issues in a taxi, but I suppose we'll have to find out, won't we? Any other councillors got any comments or questions? Nobody? In that case, then I'm going to ask the committee to agree the recommendations as per 57. I'll go through each councillor one at a time. Councillor Pacey.
Yes, I agree the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Popoli.
Thank you, Chair. I also agree the recommendations.
Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Chair. I agree the recommendations.
Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Chair. I agree the recommendations.
Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Chair. I agree the recommendations.
Councillor Ransom.
Thank you, Chair. I agree the recommendations.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the recommendations.
Councillor Paley.
Thank you, Chair. I also agree with the recommendations.
Councillor Tillotson.
Thank you. Yes, I agree the recommendations.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I agree the recommendations.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I agree also.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the recommendations.
Councillor Brooks, I believe you were present for that presentation, wasn't you?
I attended partway through, so I will abstain just because I wasn't privy to it in its entirety. So, but from what I heard, I agree with.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. I think that's unanimous. So that's unanimous. So on that note, I close the meeting. The future next meeting is the 11th of May, maybe. Grace is nodding her head. So thank you all very much for attending.